Feed's coming in and going live on Facebook. There we go. So much fun. And we're live on YouTube. So we got everybody here. Gang's all here. So I jokingly sent a text to David last night that I checked the forecast. There are no tornadoes in the forecast for today. A little bit of rain. Those of you who joined us last week, it was kind of a fun experience when we're just talking and all of a sudden the emergency thing goes off on my phone, which created havoc for the live broadcast because the audio on my phone connected to my AirPods instead of my computer and locked me out of being able to hear anything that was happening on the computer. So I could see David talking, and he was probably getting the same thing on his phone. And so, yeah, where those of you who kind of know the topography of where we're at in central Illinois, especially in Bloomington Normal, I heard this 25 years ago. I don't know how true it is, but that there has not been a tornado to touch down within Bloomington Normal city limits in recorded history. I don't know if it's the valley that we're in or it just kind of bumps over us, but that does not include areas to the south of Bloomington, like Hayworth, which is where David lives. And so he's got his farm there. He's got the horses. He's got, his wife Sue is there. And so we're all kind of, and it got progressively worse the further south you went. And I know I've got some friends in, Kyle's not on today, but I have some friends in Southern Illinois that got hammered pretty bad in those tornadoes last week. A lot of stuff was really a lot of destruction down that way. But I mean, we're looking at it here and we're seeing that it was definitely just like, here's me, here's David's office, and then here's David's house, and it was just getting progressively worse. And so we're all thankful that it was it kind of came and went. I know that it wasn't that way for everybody, but my wife and my daughter had just gotten back home, and they're heading to the basement. I had a kid at Chick-fil-A in the drive-through when so he went inside, and he's like, of course, you wouldn't want any other company to take care of you in a natural emergency than Chick-fil-A. They treated him quite well. But then I had my other son was at the high school, and I was telling people that if I were to be anywhere in a tornado, the high school that my kids go to, that's where I would want to be, because it is made out of brick into the side of a hill. It is a bomb shelter without a basement, and so it is. Or their grade school actually can go down into the university tunnels, so that's a even better place to be. But yeah, everybody was safe, but we stopped last week's call about 45 minutes into it. We were just getting to the good stuff, and so we were talking about if you weren't with us last week or you're going to watch this later, we'll kind of do a quick recap, but we were talking about company callbacks, and specifically, if you go and do a mitigation and then you get a call back from the homeowner, the real estate agent, whoever hired you, either it, some of the reasons, obviously it tested higher than, 4 is your number, 2.7 is your number, whatever your number is. So it didn't lower it to the point where you said it would. David talked about, fan noise. That was something. We talked about people that the consumer just not understanding. They walk over to the manometer, and the manometer is reading, 3, or 4, whatever, on there, and they think that that's their radon level. Obviously, if part of the job wasn't done, that was something we talked about, whether it's, or even mistakes like tools were left behind or things like that. So, uh, trying to think of, is does that hit all the reasons that we're heading back or
Well, Ben, my notes were still scattered around my desk, so I let them sit there for a week.
yeah,
And I rewrote them about 15 minutes ago. But we decided in the beginning we was going to make it a two-part sort of a presentation. That the first part would be on, why you get callbacks, the basic reasons you get callbacks, and the second was going to be kind of strictly on on failure of your picocalories per liter goals and what you can do to help that. And just as a general statement, I live in a very tough topography to do, but my big advantage I've always said is I talk to people daily from all over the United States that have failure in a certain circumstance that they just need somebody to talk to about, and I keep that in what I call the Rolodex of my mind. But I always insist that I will help you all I can, and we'll get into that a little bit. However, the rule is you got to call me back and tell me what actually succeeded,
right,
what did succeed. So I get quite a bit of knowledge that way. So the just to recap a little bit, the callback reasons that we were covering last week was not making it. The picocuries per liter not making whatever you guaranteed. We always guaranteed a little less than 4 to kind of separate ourselves, but I know people that guarantee 2.7 all the time and other things. So if your picocuries per liter aren't making it, that's the number one problem. Number one, maybe not the number one callback reason, but the number one head scratcher you get, along with the fact that uh, homeowner radon devices have become so available and so economic and so accurate that the consumers will buy them, and they'll also call you back about fluctuating numbers that they see on their homeowner monitor. So that's part of the failure discussion too that we'll have today. We talked about fan noise, and how if you get a chance to see the consumer, explain it to them a little bit ahead of time. These things make a little bit of noise, so they've got a little bit of pre-knowledge. Uh, Design your radon system so that your fan is not near the bedroom or the TV room, whatever, but try to design your system around the fact that the fan's going to be a little bit noisy. Um, and there are such things as uh, mufflers that are available in extreme situations. For sure, we sell plenty of them. I've seen people many times. I was talking to Dan that bought my mitigation company, talking to him today, and he talked about how many times he's seen the pipe going down in the Fernco so far that it touches the pipe below it, and how much vibration that causes. That people need to be very careful that to let the Fernco do its job of helping absorb the vibration and not making PVC touching PVC equals vibration. So I said I'd put that down since he mentioned that. Uh, and We've even had a little discussion. I had a few comments over my systems last week about the type of fern cones. I have one person that says he's having luck with the a real flexible fern cone that's out there that's supposed to be advertised to reduce noise. I've heard positive about that. I've also heard be very careful that if that fern cone is not supported, for instance, in an attic situation where there's no support above the fan, that those fern cones are very have a tendency to collapse. I don't know, but I thought I'd bring it up since I did have a comment. I have one person that says he's found them to help absorb more noise. So, general information, Ben and I talked about this with you. So a lot of people will call you saying, I don't understand this radon system. I don't understand the word radon. And I just moved into this house. Could you explain it to me? And Ben suggested that everyone have a good video out there so you can at least, if you don't want to go over there and talk to them or have the meeting that I suggested and have them get their neighbors there, to at least say, hey, I've got a video that explains all the frequently asked questions. So why don't you please access that video by going here? And I think that was a great idea, just a little bit more modern than Dave Smith. Uh, so, um, so the general information is one of it. Quality of work issues. In other words, there's people that are my wife would be a good example. She can spot something out of level by an eighth of an inch at 100 paces without a level. So a quality of work comes into it too. Is your fan level? And level fans have a lot to do with longevity, and I can't explain that enough. It is very, very difficult to get a fan exactly level by the time you get done with your fern cones and your brackets, but very, very important for the longevity of the fan. If a fan is out of level and water sits in it and freezes in the winter, first of all, it's out of balance all the time because the water's forever in it. But secondly, it's even worse if it freezes in the winter, which may or may not happen. But just just remember that along in the quality of work subject, level fan is extremely important for longevity. Pipe being clean, pipe being well secured, things like that. So number five, I wrote down is you always get sump pump questions. We talked about that a little bit. You put a lid on my sump pump. Now, how am I going to know if it fails? So be ready to answer that question. And you guys have heard me say 157 times use a viewport because it makes a great big argument for, yes, I had to seal your sump pump in order to reduce your lung cancer causing radon. But here's what I did to help you keep an eye on it. Uh, I always tell people I have one in my own sump pump. If I know there's a heavy rain forecasted, I check my sump before and after because it only takes a few seconds. The sump covering of their sump pump is always a question. And then tools left behind. It's amazing that I had to put that on there as number six, but as you look back to callbacks, uh, it's on there. It's on there. It's so easy to put your tape measure on a shelf next to where you're working, and then the consumer call you 3 days later and say, "Hey, I seen a tape measure here, and I know it's not mine." That kind of thing. And so I think that fan failure. Fan failure, that's not very often one of the early callbacks, but it does enter into the picture. And I think all three fan companies work hard at trying to prevent fan failure because it's not in their best interest. It doesn't fill their wallet to have fan failures, but it's a subject. It's a lot of work you ask a radon fan to do. You ask a radon fan to run 24 hours a day in very moist conditions and any type of weather. Uh, and there's really not any other motor I know of that is asked of those demands. And so, yes, fan failure is a callback thing. And I will tell you that I only work for one fan company, and there are plenty of reasons for that. But I will say that all fan companies would love to have no fan failures, and that fan failures are not good for any of them. I'm a big believer in critter guards, uh, but in my part of the world, there's plenty of squirrels, plenty of birds. But I've dug dead squirrels out of fans enough that in the early years that digging a dead squirrel out of a fan is a real discouraging job. They get very deep into a fan before they die, and it taught me that hey, let's use a critter guard. But it's not just things like leaves and nuts. I've had squirrels drop walnuts down the pipe thinking this was going to be a good storage area for them because it's nice and warm. And I'm convinced that birds and squirrels and mice and whatever are attracted to radon pipes because it's warm air. Uh, but anyway, it made me a believer in critter guards. But I have, for instance, most of my customers in Minnesota are dead against critter guards because they're convinced that they act like an ice cube tray and cause freezing up to happen more often. You take Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, it's really bad for the freezing pipes. Probably Alaska, I'm not, uh, but it's really bad for having freezing pipes. However, myself included, but a lot of people think that that's another reason for fan failure because I've seen stalactites or stalagmites on the top of ice, on the top of radon exhaust points 2 feet high. It's just like a giant icicle. And so we all wonder what happens when that icicle melts enough to drop down into the fan. Well, I'm of one of the believers that uh, critter guards will help the big chunks from dropping in. Uh, that's part of my belief. And so I've got something we're working on right now. I can show you, but we're working on a, uh, a sort of a critter guard that works right above the fan, so it can't ever freeze because the warmth of the fan, the warmth of the air coming from under the floor, will keep it from freezing. But we're doing a combo muffler slash critter guard. I don't know, Ben. Yeah. Can you see that? Can you see that where there's a it's a muffler with a critter guard in the middle,
Yeah, I
and
can
it's a
see that.
shortened version. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I'm going to be doing more testing on it because I have a good customer does a lot of radon systems that's trying to tell me that his tests show him that a 6-inch muffler does as much noise reduction as a 12-inch muffler. Well, then let's try to reduce the cost and sell them in 6-inch if that's correct. But we will find that out. We have the equipment to find that out. But I also am thinking about uh, a leaf guard or a critter guard right in the middle of it. But anyway,
Hey,
that's a subject for another.
show that a little bit at kind of a little bit of a side, little hold a whole little higher there. Yeah, so it's just dark in there, but so it looks like
That's
yeah, foam all the way
yeah,
through.
that's
Yeah.
right. That's a noise absorbing
Yep.
foam for the muffler portion. And then right in the middle, we put stainless steel critter guard material.
Okay.
And you would mount this right above your fan. So you'd have a fern co on the bottom coming from your fan, a fern co on your top going to the house.
Yeah.
And so this would also be contained in two fern coats, which would help its ability to muffle the sound. So we
Yeah.
think we're onto something, but I'll work on this later.
I would still put the critter guard on the top because if a squirrel got into that, then they're a foot above the fan until they starve to death, right? Because they can't turn around and get out.
Well, good point. But either way, they're dead.
Yeah, it's
And one way you save the fan, I hate
that.
to say that,
Yeah,
because I remember in the early days, I simply didn't have the money to buy another fan,
yeah,
and I had a fan on for less than a week, and I didn't feel it was right to call my distributor and say, "Well, I have a bad fan." That wasn't ethical.
yeah,
So I said, the only way I can survive in this world is I got to pull this squirrel out so I can put this fan back on instead of putting another $100 fan on this house. And I don't think you could have got that squirrel out with a come along and a jigsaw.
yeah,
Uh, but they just get in that deep. But anyway,
yeah.
that might be a subject for
Well,
another day. But anyway,
the squirrel's gonna die from high radon too. Super concentrated radon coming out. It's
yeah,
getting it three different ways.
there you
The
go.
fall,
There
the
you
radon. Yeah. All right.
Well, so that kind of is a recap on what we were covering before the great uh, sirens we got last week. And so I thought this week we'd cover a little bit more on fan usage. And I know, Ron, you're very interested in this. And the reason this all came about is a good friend of mine that happens to be a very large radon mitigator in this country asked me if I would meet with his foreman and offered to pay me for a session on helping him try to reduce callbacks, and mostly due to fans. But I said, well, heck, I don't like to charge for that kind of thing because we all, it's a guessing game with all of us. I just have a more educated guess. But here's the questions I get asked and the questions I have of anyone that calls me. So every day I have people call me with problems in a home. And first of all, I've discussed this over and over again is you have to be very aware of the different topographies creating different problems. And it's an incredible United States of America we live in terms of topography. So if I live in Utah, I don't know what a sump pump is. But if I live in Illinois, I sure do. Um, so the first thing I'm going to ask you, if you call me with a problem home, and everybody knows this, it's my customer, because they got to have these answers ready, or I laughingly give them hell. I'm going to say, what was your substrate material? When you got through this floor, what did you hit? How is it going to communicate? So all of us know what substrate material under a floor is almost it's 95% of the whole game of getting radon fixed. The second thing is going to be what fan did you use? And the third thing is going to be what was the manometer reading associated with this fan? And then we're going to get into this a little bit because manometer reading versus fan is very important to me. Uh, and so then the fourth thing I'm going to ask them is what were the unusual characteristics about this home? Since you've probably done 50 other homes in that area and they've all been cookie cutters, as we call them, and you get one that's not, tell me what was unusual about this home. And if you can't think of anything, go back and look at it because there's got to be something that made this home a 27 that you can only get down to 17, and the rest of them were a 10 that you got down to 2. So, unusual characteristics of the home. Uh, and the fifth thing I ask everyone that calls me is, what do you think needs to be done to fix the home? Because it's so funny because when I ask that question, they will always tell me what they think needs to be done next. And I say, then why did you call me? You have the answer. I would have I would have done exactly what you're saying. And so I think that giving yourself credit for your own knowledge and your own intuition is pretty important because it's a comedy around here, and it has been for years. You know how long I've been in this business, but it's so funny that uh, so many people know what they need to do. They just don't have anybody to talk to, is the way I put it. But anyway, uh, most people that call me have a pretty good idea of what's wrong and what they need to do about it. But let's go back to fans. The truth of the matter is, all the information I'm going to give you about reducing your callbacks is very, very successful for me. But there's a lot of widened opinions about this. A lot of people with different ideas on everything from diagnostics to fan usage. And as a quick example, I was asked by the director of the Wisconsin program once several years ago to come and do a presentation about fans to their yearly stakeholders meeting. And I said, yeah, I'll come up there and do that. So uh, I went up there and did that. And by the way, I wouldn't let them pay me. I don't let them pay me for things like that for a reason. But I went up there and said, yeah, I'll do that for you guys. See if I can help them. So I went up there and did this presentation. And the guy that was going to present after me was somebody that was paid by the industry to go around teaching classes from a university, but he had never done a radon system in his life. And let me tell you how happy I am to be out of the mitigation industry so I don't have to go to one more class being given by a person that's never done a radon job. But anyway, the presentation I gave was on fan choices and fan usage. And his idea on success and failure of radon was so diversified to that, so different than that, that he spent the entire 45 minutes when my presentation was over. My daughter was with me. She said, Dad, did you see that he was shaking his head no the entire time you were presenting? And so, well, and by the way, incidentally, 2 weeks later, I got an email from the director of the Wisconsin program, and our class was voted the number one class of the conference. So, but anyway, I simply say that because there's a lot of opinions about what you do to make radon successful. So, let's go back to fans, and then we'll go a little bit into diagnostic tools. But when it comes to fans versus manometers, I'm a big believer. I tell all my customers to take that fan flow chart, take a picture of it, and keep it on their phone so they can refer to it all the time. Because, for instance, we'll just very quickly go through. If I put your standard use fan is a Maverick, okay? You're going to use a Maverick on 80% of your homes. 70 to 90% of your homes are going to get a Maverick, depending on your topography. But if I put a Maverick on a home and and I see that manometer approach 1.5, it goes back in the trailer because I know, I'm going to look at the fan flow chart here, even though I've seen it a million times. I know that once a Maverick approaches 1.5 inches of water column, I have shown myself two things. I've shown myself that there's enough resistance. My substrate was not quite as fluid as I thought. There's enough resistance that it created a spike in the manometer. A Maverick is what we call a standard fan. As I say, a Maverick is like the house vacuum that your wife makes you use, but it's not big enough to do the garage floor. So, so when I see 1.5 on a Maverick, it goes back in the trailer. Excuse me. And I usually go straight to an Eagle. We'll keep it simple. So I'm going to take that Maverick off and I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to an Eagle. Now, at 1.5, a Maverick is down to 40 cubic foot of air a minute. 40 is my magic number. If I can't pull 40 cubic foot of air a minute, I don't want that fan on my house. Now, when we refer to that as air, that 40 cubic foot is a mixture of air, soil gases, moisture, and radon. But my point is, let's just say radon is 20% of that 40 cubic foot of air a minute. Let's say 10%, make the math real easy. So if I have 40 cubic foot of air a minute and 10% of it's radon, or I have 100 cubic foot of air a minute and 10% of it's radon, it's a huge amount of difference in the amount of radon going up the pipe. So I think that there's some things that can argue against that, but I think it's very important to remember, uh, first of all, 40 is a magic number. If you're not pulling 40 based on your fan flow chart, then switch to a different fan. If you've got a Maverick on there and you've got your standard Maverick on there and it's reading 1.5 or even a little less than 1.5 or more, you've got the wrong fan on there. Now, this is a 75% true. What I'm telling you is going to lie to you 25% of the time, but this is the way you avoid callbacks. So I put a fan on a house and it goes to 1.5 with a Maverick. And I'm like, well, all right, I'm pulling it off. That shows me that I have some resistance and I need to use a high suction fan that will handle resistance. So I'm going to go to an Eagle. Now, here's the part that confuses some people. When you take that Maverick off and put that Eagle on, the manometer is going to go up because the Eagle's capable of making that manometer go up. Don't pay attention to that. Still look at your fan flow chart. So you're at 1.5 on the manometer. All you do is switch to an Eagle and the manometer goes to 2. Okay. So you're at an Eagle at 2 inches of water column. You went from 40 to 130 cubic foot of air a minute. See what I mean? It doesn't matter that your manometer changes with the fan swap. What still matters is your fan flow chart. Now, would you rather have a house? Would you rather walk away from a house, take the people's check, go home, and know that you had 40 cubic foot a minute going up that pipe, or would you rather know you had 130 cubic foot going up that minute? So, in other words, we got to have guidelines and boundaries. And so let's just real quickly recap that because it's so simple that I think I over explain it. Put a Maverick on a house close to 1.5, take it off, put it back in a box, save it for the next house. Put an Eagle on there. All right, your Eagle goes to, let's say the Eagle went to, let's even say the Eagle went to 2.5. You went from 40 cubic foot a minute to 111. You almost tripled your volume going up the pipe. Excuse me. And as I said, I think there's a correlation between volume going up the pipe being very important to low radon numbers. It just makes sense. As I said before, if everything going up that pipe, if radon's 10% of it, I'll take 10% of 111 before I'll take 10% of 40. So you put this eagle on there, and let's just say the eagle goes up to 3.5. You're like, oh my gosh, there's a lot more resistance here than I thought. My eagle's starting to top out. Well, if that eagle goes to 3.5, my guys weren't allowed to come home. They were not allowed to leave the house if the eagle was 3.5. They were not allowed to leave a job if the manometer was with a Maverick, if the manometer was slightly under 1.5, they weren't allowed to leave it on. If they put an eagle on and the manometer was 3.5, they also had to do something. Now, doing something could include more suction points. But one way or another, that manometer had to be below I said 3.25 before you left. So that manometer had to be 3.25 no matter what you did. Now, there's two ways to accomplish that. Number one would be additional suction points. Uh, some homes, and I like big excavations, 3 5-gallon buckets at any suction points important. So don't want to get off track here, but 3 buckets per suction point is extremely important for a great suction pit. And so I've got 3.5 on my manometer, and my boss says, boy, I can't really leave. He wants me to stay here and do something. I'm going to put another hole in the floor, but I've got a finished basement. I got no place to do it. So instead of another hole in the floor, I'm going to switch to an Eagle Extreme because an Eagle Extreme has more capability. Let's just say that 3.5 on that Eagle goes to 4 when I put an Eagle Extreme on. Okay, let's look at our flow chart. I've got an Eagle Extreme on at 4 inches of water column, and I'm up to 67. Well, 67's, that's 1.5 times as much as a 40, a little bit more. So I'm in that range. However, so I'm happy. Okay. However, if my Eagle Extreme then went to over 4.25, I still can't leave. The boss says, no, you can't leave. You got to do something because even with the most powerful fan in the industry, an Eagle Extreme, I'm still got too much resistance for me to be comfortable to walk away from this house. Now, don't get me wrong. I get all kinds of people calling me saying, well, your theory didn't work here. I put this Eagle Extreme on. I had a 4.75. I had a 5, and I had no choice but to go home, and the numbers were great. I'm not saying that this is 100%, but I'm telling you that my callbacks and our company's callbacks were just almost nil. And we were called to fix a lot of homes that did have issues over time. And this is the general knowledge we used. Every home had to have, unless it was a real gravelly underneath the floor, every home with any chance of a substrate problem had to have 3 5-gallon buckets from every suction pit. And every home had to follow the fan flow versus manometer chart. And so I was talking to one of my customers about this week. Does everybody kind of get the idea of fan flow first versus manometer first?
I I I do, but I have some questions. Is now a good time to
It,
address
it,
that?
it is because we're going to get into diagnostics after this, so it's perfect timing, Ron.
Okay, I've been holding my tongue. Okay, this is some conversations you and I have had in the past, David, and I just wanted to go back to this idea because I'm dealing with a problem right now. This is center point in my problem with a customer I'm dealing with. So, I've asked you before, if a Maverick isn't cutting it, why not just jump to an Eagle Extreme? And if I remember correctly, what you said was, well, it's more power, more noise. Why go there if you don't have to? Did I get that right?
Well, yes and no. I will tell you that a lot of my customers do. They're like, look, I'm not going to do anything in between. And actually, there's a prowler in between a Maverick and an Eagle. And we used to say, uh, you can avoid that prowler by going up a notch. Well, that was before Eagle Extremes became available. And I'll say one thing, the newest Eagle Extreme, the new versions here with these EC motors, uh, has a few additional features, and I'm being told it is as quiet as a Eagle, and I believe the energy consumption uh, is comparable. So you make a very good point. I'm not too sure that since Eagles, the one fan we don't seem to be able to, Festa doesn't seem to be able to replicate as far as electronic commutated motors, uh, then maybe it's going to be phased out because the new Eagle Extreme, the biggest complaint about it was just too noisy, even above an Eagle. Now you don't have that problem in Alaska because you don't have to have that big stack. But you have a very good point. I think probably 50% of my customers have now made the decision they're just jumping to an Eagle Extreme. Well, the other advantage to an Eagle Extreme is now it also warrants the 7-year warranty because it's in the EC line. So you get a 7-year warranty instead of a five. You get a fan that is, gosh, I could do the percentage, but it's at least 15% more powerful than an eagle. So you make a good point, and it could be that that's the way I need to start preaching, because the new EC technology, as long as we're on the subject of EC technology, I haven't included the discussions of fan flow charts with any of the EC motors except this Eagle Extreme, but the other fans that are EC are also on the high end 15 or 20% better performing than their standard AC fans. So it affects it'll affect your flow chart characteristics too. But I like your question, Ron, because I like that. I like the fact that the Eagle Extreme is now qualifies for the 7-year warranty because it's part of the electronic version. It qualifies to be used in attics. So there's a lot of things that have happened recently that make that a really good argument.
Yeah, the problem is I got a whole trailer full of of the old Eagles and
Um,
Eagle Extremes.
well, when you came and bought your stock, that Eagle sure was a popular fan, and it still is.
Yeah.
Eagles do outsell Eagle Extremes for sure.
Well, and then you touch on another point is that I don't have I mean, I followed your rationale on the flow chart, and for when it's time to upgrade a fan, but I don't have a good feel for the all those new EC Mavericks that I bought. And how far can they go before you switch out that one? Do we have data on that yet?
Well, I was afraid somebody's going to ask me them complicated problems that make me think. I've got the flow chart for the EC Maverick right in front of me,
Oh,
and, and at let's see, at about at less than an inch of water column, it starts outdoing the standard Maverick, and quite it makes quite a difference in the curve. And I don't think you can probably see a little bit of this. It may or may not be valuable, but you can see uh, at the higher ends, it does a great job of excelling over the Maverick. So if I was going to say, uh, Festa's working on that, by the way, and he's having two or three different people analyze the performance so that first of all he can be accurate about it, and actually there's some adjustments you can do in motor speed and other things, but he wants to make sure he has three different independent companies do the analyzing, well, one being the fan motor manufacturer, but two other companies do the analyzing. But anyway, we'll get those numbers to you, but I have this number here that shows it's pretty effective at 2 inches. So, we're playing with things here and as long as we're on this subject, the Prowler, the Prowler is now within 15% of a standard Eagle, the EC Prowler. So now all of a sudden I've got an EC prowler that's starting to become real effective in places where eagles were used. And so the fan motor manufacturer in Germany is convinced that within a year, AC motors will be an antique of the past, and that this electronic commutated technology will take over the radon industry just like it already has the HVAC industry.
Okay. So I have a particular client, and this one's a special arrangement. He's kind of not a client. He kind of comes to me for parts.
Okay.
So I'm helping him, and it's one of those things. No, I should have just made him a client because I'm giving all this free service and advice now, and it's a learn my lesson on this one. But at any rate, he had 15 in his home. He lives way up on top of a mountain,
Okay.
and he's got he had 15. We put in. I gave him the EC Maverick, and he dropped it down to between 4 and 5. So it's effective, but the manometer is reading at about a 2.3. And I'm thinking we got to upsize it, but I wasn't sure because it's an EC and I don't know the numbers for EC.
Well, yes, I would guess when it's all said and done, I say you got to get rid of a Maverick at 1.5. I think that EC Maverick, my numbers are going to be closer to 2, but you're already over 2.
Yeah.
So remember, a size of footprint comes into it too, because we haven't got to the part where if it's over 2,200 square feet, you got to start thinking about volume too.
Yeah, and this house it's kind of it's an older home, sprawling added on or something. I don't know what the real history of it is. But at any rate, it's I want to say it's closer to about 3,000 square feet. So I knew going into it I was going to be undersized with the Maverick, but this I'm a little bit mesmerized by the EC technology, so I thought, well, we'll give it a shot.
Well, and when I talk about size of home, I'm talking footprint.
Right.
So
That's what
yeah.
I'm
So
talking about, the
yeah.
footprint.
And so really think about it. As soon as I get over 2,200 square feet, this is another thing. I'm glad you brought it up, Ron, because I haven't touched on it. When I get over 2,200 square feet, I quit thinking about any fans except high volume fans. So in other words, we've got basically three types of fan. You've got the standard fan, your vacuum cleaner that your wife makes you use, it's in the closet. You got the high suction fan, that shop back in the garage that holds up a bowling ball. Then you got high volume fan, the one that you see them use at the church parsonage or the VFW hall or whatever, that has the real wide head on it. So you have three types of fans: standard, high suction, and high volume. Well, you get into over 2,300 square feet, you need to totally start thinking high volume. Now, the beauty of that is uh, the greatest fan ever created in the world is a Legend Extreme. So now you've got a 3,000 square foot uh, footprint, and you've got probably just fair substrate material, or your manometer wouldn't be reading that high. If you remove 3 5 gallon buckets, like I know you and I talk about,
And we did on this one. We did. I made
good,
sure.
good. And you still have a manometer that high, then you know you have breathing problems. How's that?
Yeah.
You've got a real problem getting radon from A to B. So guess what? Lo and behold, I always tell people, us old time mitigators went to bed at night saying a prayer every night, waiting for an Eagle Extreme and a Legend Extreme to come along to save our lives. But a Legend Extreme, holy cow, this fan, and I tell people this: you're in an area with a lot of birds and geese and stuff. You got to watch putting this on because it's so powerful, it'll knock geese out of formation. That's a dumb man joke, by the way. So a Legend Extreme, uh, gosh, I mean, oh, let's just compare a Legend Extreme and an Eagle Extreme. Let's say 3.5 inches of water column. An Eagle Extreme is an unbelievable fan at 89 cubic foot a minute, 147 with the Legend Extreme. So in other words, here's what I got to say about a Legend Extreme. I've used it commercially, and I haven't done a million commercial jobs, by the way. And these discussions we're having are for residential, by the way.
Right.
But every commercial job I've done, I automatically put a Legend Extreme on it. And a Legend Extreme requires 4-inch pipe, or it just can't perform like it's supposed to. It's got a
Right.
6-inch inlet and outlet.
Right.
I put a Legend Extreme on, and I've seen miracles beyond belief. I can talk to you about them till I'm blue in the face, but every time I use a Legend Extreme, I walk away saying, I can't believe that fan did that. But your particular home, had I approached that home with my background, had I approached that home with that big of a footprint and the age that home was, with the general idea, well, once you get through the floor, but with the idea that my substrate material was going to be bad, then it's not even really suitable for an Eagle Extreme, because an Eagle Extreme would probably fix that house because you already know you're close. Your Eagle would fix it because you're so close. But I'm just talking in general here. My game plan, or uh, my bid would include a Legend Extreme, because number one, I've got bad substrate. Number two, I got a huge footprint. There you go. Legend
Mhm.
Extreme is the answer to that. Now, if I had bad substrate but a footprint under 2,000 square feet, it would be Eagle Extreme at the max. But you've just proven you're almost there with the EC Maverick, and Eagle is going to do it. And
So you
probably,
think an equal will get us get that radon level to drop?
yes, yes. And see, you have the advantage of knowing what a Maverick did. In my world, I wouldn't have even known what that Maverick would have done, because I'd have never used it to begin with. But you have a big advantage by knowing how much was gained by an inferior fan for the job.
Now, does an Eagle require 4-inch pipe, or can I do
No,
3?
the only fan that requires 4-inch pipe is a Legend Extreme.
Oh, okay.
Now, a Legend itself, and I think you have a couple Legends, but a
I do.
Legend
I
itself,
actually have several. Yeah.
they work better on a 4-inch pipe, but it's not totally necessary. And once again, when we talk about how there's a lot of different opinions in this industry, you're going to have a lot of people that will say that you should never use 3-inch pipe. And I don't know how many thousand homes we did in 26 years, but I never used 4-inch pipe unless it was over 2,200 square feet, and succeeded in every home, and succeeded well. So it, I think if you get into a big footprint and you have good flow, 4-inch pipe uh, becomes the best alternative. I think anytime you do anything remotely commercial, I've got a friend of mine doing a daycare center this week. Four
Mhm.
inch pipe, 4-inch pipe, 4-inch pipe. Because if you get into a position where you've misjudged anything, I believe the most powerful, uh, greatest radon fan in the world is a Legend Extreme. But if you don't have 4-inch pipe, then it's not going to perform the way it should.
Well, this particular home, the reason why I got involved the way I did is this guy started putting in his own system, and he had plumbed it with 4-inch pipe.
Good.
So, so we already had that. I kind of downsized it, because we do sidewall venting here. It's not a big, I mean, we're only talking about a few feet of pipe.
Yeah,
So
that's right. It's so easy for even me to forget that, even though we had many discussions before you met with the
gonna
people.
work. That guy at that last symposium, there was an EPA guy. He when I stood at the microphone and asked him when they're gonna reevaluate their the standards, and his answer was we have smart people that came up with these standards, and I wanted to say, okay, so that means all of Canada are not smart people because they do it like Alaska. But I'd
Well,
already given up the microphone, so
I heard a lot of scuttlebutt about the guy that stood up to the microphone and asked that question. I always assumed it was you, but I wasn't for sure. But
well,
but
when I sat down, there was two representatives from the EPA at that symposium, and one of them he was sitting behind me, he touched my back and leaned forward, and he says, "You need to get yourself on a committee."
Well, good.
That
It makes
sounds like a punishment.
yeah. Well,
Well,
yeah.
well, yeah, that too, but I just thought it was funny. Here's the EPA telling me, yeah, we got to change our standards.
Oh yeah, I had people call me up saying, "Well, you won't believe it, but this one guy from Alaska stood up there and asked him why in the heck they don't have the same rules as Alaska to make it better." So that was you.
That was.
So anyway, Ron, I think that you are so close to being there. I'd use one of your Eagles, but you have, as I say, had I went and bid this home and made a plan,
Mhm.
my plan may have been, well, first of all, you don't know till you see the substrate. You can make
Right,
all the guesses in the world, but
right.
as old as that home was, my guess would have been poor substrate. So I probably would have leaned into that Legend Extreme because I had a huge footprint and I assumed low footprint. So I would have bid it for 4 inch or low, huge footprint, low communication. I would have bid Legend Extreme with 4 inch pipe as a bid because you can always change that. I mean, that's just your idea
Sure.
of what you're going to do.
Right.
I've been in a million situations. People can't believe it when I say this, but I've been in a million situations where I thought this home was going to be harder or need a different fan or a lot more work than it was, and giving people a refund. But look, hey man, your home wasn't as tough as I thought it was going to be. Before you pay me, let me refigure this dollar, and let me tell
Yeah.
you how many people go to church and tell everybody in their little meeting,
Yeah.
you're not going to believe what this guy did to me, but he actually decided he wasn't going to charge me as much as he bid, and the next thing you know, your phone's ringing off the hook. But that's a subject for another day about
Well,
how
then now what's interesting about this particular home, and I don't want to belabor this particular job because you got a lot of, this was on a mountaintop. And so I thought, okay, it sounded like it was, I mean, I knew it was going to be a rocky terrain underneath the home.
uh-huh,
Um, he did not build it. It was before him.
uh-huh.
But even though he's lived there about 30 years, um, but I was thinking it was gravel and some sand, but not the glacial silt that we see in lower elevations. And so I thought we were okay with it. But then as we, were progressing through discussing his job, he said, "Oh, well, there's he says, I've run into rocks under, when I was moving to build on and build another structure here." And he says, "I've got a 12-ton rock that took me days to get out with a dozer, and he says, I got those." And I'm thinking, great, this house is probably sitting on one of those.
Yeah, it's so hard to tell, and if we had X-ray vision, it'd make our job easier. But I always say that, the radon guy is the one person in the world that has to come up with a solution for the problem that every home out there has.
Right.
Every problem that exists, we have to find a solution to. The plumber doesn't, the electrician doesn't. Nobody has to but the radon guy. But if that house is built on a 12-ton uh, slab of flat rock, you still have to figure out how to mitigate it.
Yeah. Right.
It's not your fault that they built it on that rock, but you still have to figure out how to mitigate it. That's for sure. I think as we talk here, part of this thing about fans, and I presented this fan thing so many times, and I have a stand that I put a fan on. I have a gate valve on it, and I can switch fans, and I can. This is what I did in Wisconsin at that meeting. And everybody enjoyed it so much because it was interactive that way. And I gave everybody a fan flow chart, and then I put a fan on I think it was actually a Legend on the stand, and I started playing with the gate valve and asked them, okay, right now the manometer is saying this. Sorry, sorry, I got something coming through my hearing aids. Sorry about that. So, so I would adjust the valve and I'd say, okay, person back there in the fourth row. Well, a lot of them were testers. A lot of them were health department people. Some of them were young ladies and young men that worked at health departments, but they all ended up getting a kick out of it because all they had to do was look at the fan flow chart and say, oh, well, now you told me this fan's on there, and at 2 inches, it says it says 176. And I'd say, right, you got it. And so everybody really enjoyed the class, but I'm not sure why I got back on that. But since the fan flow discussion seems to get this much, let's do diagnostics at our next one. And because if I start talking about diagnostics, we could be here another 45 minutes. But I think now, Ben, do you agree with me?
Yeah, I mean that's we've done it, and I think we should always come around to it once every 3 to 6 months is talk about diagnostics for sure because
Yeah, I
it's a
have a
popular
lot of,
topic.
well, for sure. I mean, I have a lot of opinions about diagnostics that are a little bit off the beaten path. And so I think it'd be a good topic to go into, and it could get me some negative attention on the airways, but we'll go into some diagnostics about it. But I want to make sure everybody understands that uh, not the stuff that I'm telling you about fan usage is I want to quantify that by saying this is about a 70%, 75, 80% effective way to reduce callbacks. But I can tell you personally, I know that I had the fewest callbacks of anyone in my area. And I know that even the state of Illinois has called me occasionally and say, hey, nobody can figure out what to do here. Would you mind taking a look at this? And we've had to do some unique things, but we've never failed. I think another thing I would like to say is in 25 years I did radon mitigation, never failed a home. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't go back 6 times to a couple of them, but never ultimately failed a home. And I also want to reiterate the fact that a lot of my knowledge also comes from the fact that I'm my position as a distributor. One of the ways I built the business, as Ron and the rest of you know, is by giving everybody my cell phone number for when they have problems or questions. And I get all of those problem homes thrown at me. So with my policy of expecting a callback when the solution hits, it just gives me so much knowledge to know, hey, I almost anybody that called me, I say, oh my gosh, I had a guy call me last week that had a similar problem, and here's what fixed it. And that's not to say it's going to fix the next home, but I think it is a privilege that I don't know anyone else in the industry has. Uh, so I think that's a good thing. Does anybody else have any questions about fans? And we can touch on it again next week if we do it next week. But let's do diagnostics for the biggest part of the next one. But does anybody have any other questions on fan usage?
I do have another question, but I want to give somebody else a chance if they want. If
I'm
nobody,
not seeing anything on either Facebook or on YouTube right now, so I'll chime in if I see anybody popping questions over there. But as of right now, if you're in the Zoom room, you got first dibs on asking your questions.
okay. Well, here's a situation. I just got a call back this morning from a job we did almost a year ago, probably about 10 months ago. And anyway, it was a super expensive home. I'm going to guess it was like a $5 million home. Up on the mountainside, new home, a fairly new home, slab on grade, and I believe that the footprint was like 2,000 square foot. So we went ahead and we picked the best spot, drilled our hole, pulled out the substrate, dropped in a Maverick fan. And they had, I think, as I recall, they were running around 7 to 10 uh, radon level, and we dropped it down to, I think it was just a little over 1. So I was pretty happy about that. We went away, and all this time she called me this morning. She goes, "Yeah, I've been noticing it. I've been meaning to call you, but for the last couple of months," she has an EcoCube, and she said for the last couple of months it's been showing about 5 to 7, and I'm thinking to myself, what happened here? It was great. We monitored it for a while, and it was great. And now, this, you know, 10 months later, it's not. And sure, she says she noticed it a month or so ago and just hasn't called me yet. But still, how was it so great and now it's popped up that high? Do we have a fan failure? I don't know. I've got an appointment to go see her tomorrow. But my guess is to take a Eagle or something and upsize the fan at this point. But the manometer reading, I asked her to confirm the manometer reading, and it's a 1.2. So what do you think?
Well, this qualifies for the thing I laughed about earlier. What do you think? But I think that the things that I think is, yes, I do get this quite a bit where there's a fluctuation that happens, and sometimes uh it happens just every once in a while, sometimes it happens a year later. And so once again, you got to try to figure out what made that happen. But one of the red flags I had was, since it was a new home on a mountain, you get different wind conditions, different weather conditions. I'm not too sure I wouldn't have used one of your legends because it was close enough to that 2,200 square foot cutoff. And that legend, you said you were at 1.2. That's pretty high on a Maverick. 0.75 is just a perfect number for a Maverick, I think. But 1.2 is starting to uh,
Cause concern.
is starting to show some resistance. And so if I was going to go up there and it wasn't fan failure, uh, then I would want to take an Eagle and I'd want to take a Legend both because let's just say at 1.2, your Maverick is already down to 70, 60 to 70. So you're getting there. 1.5 is the end of the line, and you're at 1.2, you're probably 70. Okay. Well, if you would have put a legend on it instead, I'm going to say that the manometer would have went up to, let's even say it went up to 1.75. It'd still be 120. So you'd be almost exactly doubling the volume going up the pipe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you did your caulking and everything correctly, which we didn't talk about, you guys remind me next week the importance of caulking, and I'll give you some examples of how people underestimate the importance of caulking and sealing. Please, Ron, you be the one to remind me of that, and I'll talk a little bit about the study I did on the passive new construction to prove it.
I'll
But,
try, but I'll be on a road trip next week, so
well,
I'd be coming to see you.
maybe you'll sit here and do it then. Well, anyway, I think that the red flags that hit me, it's of course it's always a red flag when you do a house and it's really good, and this is the value and the curse both of homeowner monitors. Now, I happen to think that's a very accurate device, but it also, if you go up there and you scratch your head and the fan's still working good, the manometer hasn't changed since the day you installed it. That's important too. If the manometer pressure changes, then that indicates something happened with the substrate availability. But you get there and everything's working good, and you have any suspicion at all, you need to take another uh, homeowner device and leave it there so that she can verify that hers matches the other one. So in
I
other
told her we would do that. Yes.
yeah, anything can happen. That happens to be, as I said, a very accurate device. However, I think a Maverick's a very accurate fan, but it could have failed. And just like this device, you never know.
Right.
But it's interesting, but you got to look around for what's different. Number one, you got to make sure the device is reading correctly. Number two, and you've got to see if you can identify, is it sporadic? That was my first question I was writing down as you was talking. Does it jump to five occasionally, or is it five, period? Uh, I don't know if you got that answer, but if it
I
does,
did. It's she said today uh it was between 4.2 and 4.7 for the last several hours.
okay,
So but yesterday it was at 5.6 on a daily average, you
okay.
know. So
So
it sounds like it's more than just a spike.
correct, but in my opinion, I'm not sure there's any science to back this up, but in my opinion, a lot of times a house that fluctuates, even if it's 1.6 one day and 2.3 the next day, a house that fluctuates can also be an indicator that a larger fan would have helped,
Hmm.
because the wind direction, the barometric pressure, rain, and other things that can happen in Alaska, especially on a hill, can affect the ability for a radon system to do its job, but it has less ability um, to alter, to temporarily alter the effectiveness of a radon system if you oversize the fan. And so I'm a big believer in slightly oversizing rather than undersizing. So you were on the verge of undersizing with that fan. You're at a 1.2, at 1.35, we pulled them. You're at a 1.2 with a footprint that's almost too much for my liking for a Maverick, and on a brand new home built in a hillside. So you've got a lot of things that would have made me want to jump up a size, because my opinion is, even if you didn't have what you're describing, I'll bet you, even when you walked away with a 1.2 or whatever you walked away with, I'll bet that different times of the year, different wind direction, and different other seasonal conditions also made it fluctuate then. Because
Hmm.
I don't think the Maverick was quite powerful enough to totally control the fluctuation. And maybe no fan is, but the more powerful the fan, the less the fluctuation's going to happen, because the less the conditions can affect it.
Hmm.
If I'm going up the hill and I'm pulling a trailer and I've got a truck with a big diesel motor, it's going to be affected a whole bunch less than my truck with a V6. And so that truck with a V6 is just fine when you're going straight down the road, but then you get on that hill and it's the same thing. You get a real windy day, or you get a very cold day, or you get a big snowstorm, or you get the wind in a different direction than it usually comes. You need that big diesel engine to overcome the surprise condition you just got, or the different condition you just got. So we'll talk some more about that. But
Well, very good. No, it's been most helpful today. Thank you.
well, good, good. So you're coming down to the lower states next week?
I am.
Good, good for
Yeah, I
you.
haven't charted my course back home. I'm doing one of my famous road trips, so
Well,
we'll
maybe
see
I'll see you.
your
Uh,
neighborhood.
maybe I'll see. Well, okay, okay. I think this is a good place to leave it, because we'll get onto these other subjects like diagnostics next week. And what else did I tell you to remind me that I already forgot that we want to cover next week?
I forgot to. It's that age.
Both of us will remember.
Caulking.
Oh, sealing and caulk. See, Ben, you've got the mind.
I
Or
only
did
have
you
one
write?
job today. To remember caulking
All right. Well,
and enunciate.
there you go. I'm actually writing that down. We have anything to add, Ben?
I don't think so. I think the sun is out, the wind is low. I think we've safely made it through a week. Uh, no, nothing dangerous happened.
I
So
know.
yeah,
And what I think I'm seeing is, throughout the week, several people are accessing this.
lots.
It's very few people have time to just do what I really appreciate is people like you, Ron, that can find the time to participate, because it's so handy. You brought up a couple subjects that said, "Oh, I better touch on this," but it's also seems like, as Ben is saying, a lot of people accessing it. I'll get text and emails and phone calls during the week saying, "Hey, man, I finally got a chance to catch up, and thanks for doing that. I picked up something here, or I have something to also comment." I had two people this week call me and say, "I'd like to make a comment." One guy, I'll say real quickly. One guy says, I found that pressure field extension testing and your flow chart has almost totally eliminated my callbacks." And I said, "Well," I said, "I'll cover that." And I said, "If you can get on it, you be sure to be the one to cover it." But that's one that's one thing we'll get into, different ways to do diagnostic testing. But that was an interesting comment from a customer this week.
Well, hey, I wanted to mention I saw this on last week's video, and Andrew James had mentioned. He said, "I've had over 30 fans in the past year fail from overheating due to a high water table for a few days. Water will come up to the pipe and the motor burns out without enough airflow. Do you think a self shut-off mechanism could be added to high suction fans when this happens to shut off before the motor overheats?"
Well, that's a good question, and the manufacturers will tell you that heat doesn't affect fans like it used to. It's a different technology, but I will tell you the electronic commutated. I'm getting real good at saying that word, commutated. The electronic commutated fans won't be influenced by heat at all. It's just not in the cards. It's just by design. I shouldn't say not influenced at all, because I'm certainly not a motor or a fan expert, but I can tell you that I'm surprised at that statement. I'd like to think about it a little bit, because I understand that sometimes the water table gets so high under a floor that it creates gurgling. And I've had it plenty of times in the high water table we have here in central Illinois. But I'm not so sure that
I know
I'm not
mine
so sure.
does because I told Dan to put it too close to my sump pump, so that's 100% on me. Uh, I knew where I wanted my suction point, and so I get a little bit of that because it's just so strong there. But
So
yeah,
strong, right?
those of you that might be listening here, you may or may not have heard just a second ago. It kind of sounded like maybe double talk on there. I was trying to play the video from last week, so it was probably coming through. But yeah, I wanted to look at the numbers, and even last week's video, we've had over 100 people have watched it there. And then obviously on YouTube, we'll usually have in the first week we'll have an extra 50 or so people that'll watch it there. So we do appreciate you guys. We could bounce around to a different time every single week, and we know it's going to work for some of you, and and for some of you it's just not going to work, especially when we're dealing with time zones from literally Alaska to Maine. And so it's going to work and not work for everybody, but we do appreciate chiming in on the Facebook side, emails that I'm getting during the week, thoughts that you're popping in there. It allows us to answer those during this time and hopefully create some content that you can pop out for. So, for sure.
All right. Thanks. And Ben, have you gotten have you gotten the certification, or the that's not the right word, but are you going to present at the next national conference?
So I've submitted a couple different topics. One of them kind of came in a dream here a few weeks ago, and I think it's I'm not going to mention it. If it gets accepted, it may be the most fun one that I've ever done, and so it is it's I think it has the potential to make radon conferences, which often are kind of slow and kind of there's a lot of data, and so I thought, hey, I'm going to do a lot of information really fast. And so that was my idea. And then the other one that I submitted for the Sunday seminars, which have a little bit more time because the other ones are only 20 minutes. I submitted the one that I did a couple weeks ago for doing SOPs and creating those standard operating procedures, which, obviously what we're talking about today it's really an important part of those standard operating procedures, because if you do the same thing and repeat it, that's where you're going to have, a lot of success. And that's not to say, obviously, that every house is different. Like you said, every house is going to come in, you're going to have different substrate. But what I'm saying is that when you have a checklist saying, hey, I'm going to do this before I do this. I'm going to make sure when I leave, I didn't leave the ladder on the side of the house. I have a checklist for it. Obviously in David's company, they went a step further and they had a second person checking it off. And so, you don't trust the foreman. You have somebody else also checking it off, because it's easy to do that. But also, like what are your standard operating procedures for when you answer the phone? What's the operating procedure for how fast you get back to someone? What do you do a quote? And so that one gets really detailed. And that's for people who want to create a company that is positioned to grow. And that may be that missing link that keeps you from, everything down to who answers the phone and who talks to it and who does the bid. And so when you have people in your company, sometimes the owner wants to micromanage and wants to, do everything, where there's stuff that David will tell you Sue would not allow David to do. And so, and that's how you create a successful company, is when you do that. And so that one I've submitted for the Sunday one. So.
Well, and I might add, Ben, what we covered today, I never really thought of it as standard operating procedure. I kept saying, hey, my guys weren't allowed to leave a home with this fan on it.
Yep.
Or my guys weren't allowed to leave a home without taking 3 5-gallon buckets out of each suction point. So in other words, part of our discussion today about how to not get callbacks was certainly part of our standard operating procedure, because they just weren't allowed to take shortcuts. And a lot of the fan knowledge, I'm a true believer, really saved us. But anyway, next week we'll cover a lot more about the diagnostics and the importance of doing some little things to help keep your numbers down, because it's all in the numbers. My state law about radon says as low as reasonably achievable. It doesn't say 4. It doesn't say any. It says as low as reasonably achievable, and I always took that serious. I didn't want a 3.9. I wasn't interested in a 3.9.
Yeah.
So anyway,
well, when I was testing homes, I read that line to say, to the best of your ability, right? And I would tell homeowners, I said, there's some people who are morons and their ability is not very high. And so you've got to consider the best, like my ability to shoot a free throw when given, the game winning, shot is lower than Michael Jordan, his or Curry's ability to make that shot. Right. They were talking the other day in a game. They're like, if you give, Curry a free throw, it's like a guaranteed point. That is not the case with me. So with mitigators, it's the same thing. Some people are going to come in and they're going to put 3 suction points in a house because that's what the house needs. And some people are going to argue that it's not necessary. And so it's vague enough to open up for people to do the best of their ability, and so reasonably possible, right?
Yeah. Reasonably achievable was misconstrued. I think it was misconstrued quite often.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to go home and feed the horse.
Yep.
Bye.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being a part of it. We will see you next week. We're going to talk about caulk, apparently. No, we're going to
talk about diagnostics also.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much. We will see you. Continue the conversation over on Facebook, and we'll see you next week. Have a great great week, and don't forget to send in your taxes. Well, that'll happen between now and when we see you again. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Ron.
Bye.